Okay, welcome to the whiteboard session for Neurophysiology section 1.0. So we're going to discuss the divisions of the nervous system, and we're going to break it down into pretty much two components, which you could add another division, a third division of the central nervous system, but we're not going to discuss that now. So we're going to be discussing the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, and then we are going to skip over the enteric nervous system. But first, let's just talk about concepts here. So in embryological development, okay, we have these like specifications. I would say like a regional specification of our nervous system throughout our embryological development, okay? And in our, let's get a pen here. And let's go blue, okay? And so I would say that in our fourth week, okay, we have this division of what we call the primary vesicles, okay? And the primary vesicles are broken into like three swellings, three vesicles. Okay, so we have prosencephalon. Okay, so like prosencephalon. We have a mesencephalon, and we have a rhombencephalon. Okay, so rhombencephalon. And so these three primary vesicles. Okay, this is about 4 weeks. This is our representative of our nervous system. This is the rostral side or our head, and then this is the caudal side, which is going to be our tail. Okay, so head, tail. And after about fifth, okay, so after another week passes, our fifth week, these primary vesicles can then subdivide. Okay, so we have subdivision happening next. And what we will do then is we'll sort of stand this up, okay, and our just a second here. Okay. Let's do this. Okay. So what happens if about 5 weeks now, we still have division of our prosencephalon. Okay, that's this region here, right? These two swellings. But the prosencephalon then becomes two things. We have a telencephalon and a diencephalon. Okay, so telencephalon and diencephalon. Okay. The mesencephalon, okay, this stays the same. Mesencephalon, no change. Mesencephalon, okay. Next, we have further division of our rhombencephalon, okay, and we can break this down into two swellings here. Okay, so we have two swellings that are going to be called the I'll say together, we'll call these two the metencephalon. Okay, so these two swellings are the metencephalon, and then the third is going to be the myelencephalon. Okay. So met, meson, dian, telin, right? Prosencephalon, rhombencephalon. So here we go. We can mesencephalon here. So these are going to be the primary vesicles, okay, at 4 weeks, okay, this side. Then we have subdivision of each one of these primary vesicles, and this is around 5 weeks, okay. So that's this side over here. And if we, the thing is, we transfer this out now to like a generic. Actually, let's use a lateral view, maybe be better. Let's get a lateral view. Like this. Let's do a lateral view of the brain, midbrain, cerebellum, spinal cord, midbrain, pons, medulla, spinal cord. Okay. So here we have our cerebrum, we have our midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. And then we have our cerebellum. Okay. We have our cerebrum, cerebellum, midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, and spinal cord. Okay. I would say that everything here is in this area is called the central nervous system. Okay. And we can then divide this even further. Okay, so if we go back to our subdivisions in the 5th week, okay, there's somebody, I can't remember who it was, but so I'm sorry I can't give you credit, but somebody at a lecture online or at med school, they talked about how there was the telencephalon and the diencephalon. Okay, so your diencephalon is going to be deeper, okay, and your telencephalon is going to be more the outer areas of the cerebrum. And the way to sort of keep these straight, okay, is that if you remember, there's a Princess Diana, okay, so she was always the focus of the paparazzi. And the paparazzi always had their telescopes focused in on Princess Diana. Okay, so all the paparazzi were always looking through their telescopes to Princess Diana. So remember that the telescopes are on the outer part of the cerebrum, and they're sort of looking in towards the center. And the diencephalon is going to have structures like your thalamus and your hypothalamus. Okay. So these are more basal layer of the cerebrum. Okay. Then the mesencephalon, which is forming your midbrain, mesencephalon. Okay. This was the prosencephalon. It's also this prosencephalon, okay, is also referred to as your forebrain. And that's similar terminology that we have here with the midbrain, right? So forebrain, midbrain, and then that makes these final structures here, which includes the pons, the medulla oblongata, and the cerebellum, are going to be referred to as your hindbrain. Okay? And that includes the rhombencephalon. Okay, and then we divide again. So we just talked about 2 more divisions within the rhombencephalon. okay? And these are two divisions, okay? We have here, so we have two divisions here, and this is going to be the met encephalon versus the myencephalon, okay? The met encephalon is going to be the pons and the cerebellum, and the myencephalon is going to be the medulla oblongata. Okay, the way I don't know if it works for me. If it works for you, great. But the way I got these two straight is that I just thought about the one that was different. Okay, and if I could get the one here, I would basically just know that there's the other two are meta. So I would say my medulla. So I would just think of my as in my own medulla, my encephalon medulla. So my medulla. And then I just automatically know that the metencephalon then is going to be the pons and the cerebellum. So this is the embryological development, sort of the terminology and the regional specification. I would call it the regional specification of the brain or the nervous system, central nervous system. And we can then now talk about like the major divisions here. And we will say that the nervous system, okay, is going to be divided into central nervous system, which is what I just showed, right? And we can then say with another color here, we will then divide this into the peripheral nervous system, okay? And talk about like the functions. Let's do another lateral brain here. And the spinal cord, cerebellum, midbrain, posterior lobe. Okay. So this is the central nervous system. Let's talk about like the functions. Okay. Essentially what's happening, okay. Let's go ahead and add one more layer on it here. So out of our spinal cord, right, we have peripheral nerves, right? And these are coming into the peripheral nervous system. The overall function of the central nervous system is going to be things like collection, and so collection. My spelling is not going to be right on this, but it's okay. So collection is going to be one. So we're collecting information that is coming from the periphery, right? So this is information like environmental or sensory information from the environment, like temperature, or if it's like pain that's coming from the body. All this information is going to be collected and it's going to be sent to the central nervous system, okay? And then we're going to need to like integrate that information, and you know we're going to need to like associate it with things like memory, maybe associate. We're going to like have to like make some coordination, right? So coordinate, and we're going to have all these things happening when information is coming in to the central nervous system. And so it's collecting it, it's integrating like memories and associating memories with it. And maybe senses, special senses to associate and form a memory. Higher areas of functioning, like your prefrontal cortex, which is going to be your like inhibitions and making good decisions and things like that. You have left and right hemispheres that we'll talk about, and what we call lateral or hemispheric lateralization. And this is sort of like specialization of different hemispheres in your brain. You have like the logical side of the brain, which is like your left side of the brain, and more like what they call an artistic side of the brain on the right. Some have more functions of auditory and like language centers, why the other side might be more like spatial. Okay, so you're integrating and associating all this information ultimately to elicit a motor response. Okay, and so let's talk a little bit more about the tracks and sort of like the signals of information that are coming through. Okay, I would say that anything in your in the periphery of the body, like let's just say pain or temperature or vibration, these sort of senses are coming in, right? So they're going to come up into the central nervous system and then go through this processing, right? This processing, right? So buffering, right? It's that buffering wheel. And it's going to get processed, and then ultimately we're going to elicit a motor response, right? And that motor response is going to be going back out to the periphery of the body, maybe to skeletal muscle or something, right? So maybe flex your bicep, move your arm or your leg, or jump or skip or whatever it is. So this is all motor information leaving the body. And one thing we need to get straight is that sensory information or a sensory tract coming to the central nervous system, okay, is what we call an afferent, tract or an afferent signal, okay. A motor, okay, or a signal or a tract that is leaving the central nervous system, all right, and going back out to the body. This is what we call an efferent signal or tract. Okay, so what we end up with then is sensory afferent and motor afferent. Okay. I think that's a pretty good little intro. Okay, a little intro to your central nervous system here. So let's go ahead and move on. We'll do more of this in depth, I would say, at some later videos. Oops. Okay, so let's talk about peripheral nervous system now. Okay, so we can further subdivide our peripheral nervous system into sensory and into right here, motor. Okay, and we can say that the sensory information, okay, so this is sort of coming out from the periphery of the body, right, and going back to the central nervous system. Oops. So we call this C, central nervous system, right? And that's to sort of get processed, right? So it's sort of a little processing wheel, right? And then that motor response, right, is going to then sort of go back down to the periphery, right, out of the spinal cord, and then we will further classify what the motor signals, motor information is. So we will classify these two, sensory and motor. And I think to first talk about sensory information, we need to first talk about the difference of like conscious versus unconscious. Okay, conscious versus unconscious. And I would say that conscious sensory information is something that is going to be processed in the cerebral cortex. Okay. And we'll talk later about what the cortex is. I would say unconscious information is something that is going to be, is information that is not processed. It is not processed by the cortex. Okay. And the cortex is essentially, it's just to prep your brains with what the cortex is. It's this outer portion of the brain. So if you imagine like a stadium, okay, so if your cerebrum is a stadium, and it's sort of closed in dome stadium, well, the actual like roof and trusses of the stadium is going to be your cortex. And so it's an outer portion of the brain, while the inner portion of the brain would be like the field, right? So the field and the tunnels coming up into the field, right? So that would be your basal layer of the brain. And you typically have within the cortex, you have conscious level thought. Okay, so these are things like if I ask you 2 + 2 = 4. So this is something I'm consciously thinking about. I'm consciously thinking about everything that I'm saying here in this, presenting this lecture, doing this whiteboard lecture here. I'm receiving information that is coming in from what I'm writing on the board here, what I'm speaking with, and so forth. But I have unconscious sensory information that I'm not necessarily thinking consciously at the point of where, maybe what sort of senses are coming into my toes at the time, right? Or in my right side of my right leg, right, the lateral side of my right leg. So I'm unconsciously thinking about those, or the position of my body, maybe, right, which direction my left toe is pointed at this moment. Now I can move unconscious, so you can actually move unconscious senses to your conscious, right? So, if you ask me to think about which direction my toe is pointed, then I can sort of move that unconscious thought, sensations, right, to my conscious thought, and then sort of process that more with my higher levels of thinking in my cortex. But I just want you to just think about conscious versus unconscious thought, okay? Then we can further divide these sensations, okay, into, we'll say, into a special, okay, into a special sense, or into what we'll say is a general sensation. Special sensations, first we'll talk about those. So those are, these are like your vision, your hearing, the olfactory, so say your vision, hearing, olfactory is smell, right? Gustatory, and that is your taste, okay? These are special senses, and we'll say the difference, so a key distinction between a special and a general sensation is going to be that a special sensation is going to be something that you would just find in one part of the body, okay? So you're only going to find you're only going to receive sensations in a single part of the body that are related to vision, right? So that's what's coming through your eyeballs, right? You're not collecting vision through your toes. You are getting your hearing through your ear, right? Not through your fingers. You're not smelling with your elbows, right? So we would say that the special senses, okay, you can find in just one part of the body. All right, so one part of the body. And then we would say that a general sense, this is going to be something like, we'll further subdivide this, okay? But we will say that general senses are things like pain, temperature, pressure, those sorts of things. These are coming from the environment, coming from our body, right? These things you can find all over. Okay, you can find. So we'll say we don't have a room here. We'll say right here, right? So we'll say all over the body. Okay. So general senses, we can collect this sensory information from all over the body. Special sensations we can find pretty much in one location of the body. Now, just to point something out, okay, so if we have a general sensation and a special sensation, we can have them in one location together, okay? So think about like your gustatory, so your sense of taste, right? So this is bitter, sweet, savory, right? So that's your sense, that's your taste buds. It's your sense of taste, but you can also have on your tongue, you can have general senses. You can have free nerve endings within the skin that are picking up like pain and temperature, right? So if you bite down on your tongue, then you're going to feel pain. Or if you drink scalding hot coffee, you're going to burn your tongue. But you also have those taste buds there that are picking up those special senses. So you can have both in one location in that respects. Okay. But you will not find the taste buds in other locations outside of just the tongue. Okay, so just wanted to make that distinction there. And we can further divide the general sensations now. We can say that we have somatic and we have visceral. Okay. Somatic is going to be so soma as in body, okay, as in viscera being like within the body. All right, we can say that somatic is going to be superficial. We come in from the superficial parts of the body, okay. So this is going to be it's going to be like from your skin, okay, or from your skeletal muscle. All right. Visceral is going to be sensory information that is going to be coming from within, deep within the body. Okay. And these are going to be so deep is going to be sensations from like take for instance like your GI system, right? So your GI system is also going to be receiving similar general sensations, but it's going to be characterized a little bit differently. So we can talk about this, right? So somatic, right over here, somatic versus visceral. Somatic, we would say that these are things like, again, from your free nerve endings. So we have free nerve endings. These things are picking up picking up like pain, temperature. Okay. We have pressure. Okay. Pressure. So we have these, we say vibration too, vibration. We have specialized nerves in our skin called Meissner, corpuscles, Pacinian, Pacinian, corpuscles, and like Ruffini corpuscles. And these guys are responsible for like pressure, vibration, and like touch. Okay. And our visceral sensations, okay, so are coming from deep within the body, like our GI system. So our GI system still has the ability to sense pain, right? also temperature, or not so much temperature, but pain for certain. But we call a visceral pain a dull pain. Okay. And then we reference so visceral sensations, like again in your GI system. Like take for instance, if you eat a full pizza in one sitting, you're going to feel disgusting. You're going to have that stretch on your belly, right? You're going to feel it sort of moving. You can feel food move through your colon sometimes, right? Sometimes it can be painful. So we can say that we can have movements. All right. So visceral sensations are general sensations, but they're dull, like dull pain, stretch, movement. These are coming in areas like your GI system, right? Somatic are coming. These things are going to be like pain, temperature, pressure, vibration, touch. These are all coming in through areas like your skin, right? And then also, well, you think so we have something that is called the let's just continue right down here. It's called the locomotor system. Okay. And the locomotor system is the way to think about it is there's both a sensory and a motor component to this. And we need to talk about like another sensation that we have, which is called proprioception. And proprioception is like, so if I think about proprioception, it's like if I close my eyes and I put my hand out in front of me, when I close my eyes, my ability to bring my other hand directly back over to the other hand, or even more, my finger, bring another finger from my left to my right, even though my eyes are closed, my body has the ability to do that. And that is sort of working in this concept of proprioception and our locomotor system. Proprioception is like that three-dimensional space awareness, right? And what it is, it's incorporating information that is coming from like your skeletal muscle, your ligaments, your tendons, right? All this information is getting sort of bundled together, right? And it's coming in as a sensation of like positioning, right? Positioning, and it's going into the central nervous system as a sensation, but then it's also going back out as a motor response, right? To sort of guide. So if I say it like this, then I go back to the example of my putting my finger out, closing my eyes. Well, my right hand here is stationary. It is collecting all that sensory information from my muscle, my ligaments, my tendons, and it's sending it to the central nervous system as sensations, right? As bundled information. And then you're having all this collection, integration, association and all that's sort of happening to coming from my locomotor senses, and it's going to elicit and coordinate the motor response going back through the same skeletal muscle, tendons, and so forth to guide my finger, okay, and to touch my finger to the other, okay. And you have other areas of brain like balance and equilibrium, right? So proprioception is involved in that. You have other organs like your cerebellum. We'll talk about all that stuff more in depth down in another lecture, but I just wanted to sort of lay that out. First, have you at least sort of understand it on a high level before we go into more depth. And so next, Next, let's go ahead and clear this out. Make some, let's get rid of at least this material. That's fine. So now we are going to, we just did peripheral nervous system, so we did the sensory, right? So now we are going to do motor, okay? And motor, kind of like when we were talking about sensory, we did a short discussion on like conscious versus unconscious thought. When we're talking about motor information or an efferent signal, right? We can talk about something that is so it's basically voluntary motor responses versus involuntary, right? So a voluntary motor response is going to be me, um, flexing my muscle intentionally. Voluntarily can control, can contract, or um, uh, inhibit a skeletal muscle, right? So we have voluntary control. These are things like our skeletal muscle, right? We have involuntary control, though. Involuntary control. So this is also our muscle. So think about like our smooth muscle. Okay, so smooth muscle is within like our GI system. There's something called peristalsis. So you have a wave, a peristaltic wave, and that's basically a coordinated contraction of your musculature, your smooth muscles in your GI system. That's what gives the ability to move food and move content through your GI system. So we don't think about that. However, that just happens naturally, right? We have our cardiac muscle, cardiac tissue. These things are all involuntary, right? No control again. And we can divide this motor information, okay, into we'll say into, sure, we can go bigger than that. Got all the space over here. Do it. All right, never mind. Over here. So we'll say that we can divide this into somatic, okay, versus autonomic. Okay. And somatic is going to be the same thing as the sensory information. So this is in the body, right? So soma meaning the body. This is going to be in the skin, right? Skeletal muscle. So referring to like the locomotor. But instead of receiving information, we're sending information. So this is sort of the coordination and control of the muscles. It's activating the muscles and tendons, right? And then the autonomic system here. So this is going to be autonomic system. We can then divide again into what is called the sympathetic nervous system, and then the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. And the difference between a somatic versus an autonomic is that somatic is under voluntary control, while autonomic is under involuntary control. Okay. And meaning that it's automatic, it's autonomic. Okay. And it's not something we think about. We don't think about our smooth muscle. We don't think about our cardiac muscle. So we're not intentionally or voluntarily, contracting the muscles to move food through our GI system, or to increase our heart rate or decrease our heart rate, right? So these are physiological, very physiological systems. Okay, so these are things like controlling our heart rate or our blood pressure. Okay, or our GI system, some of the functions within there. Okay, so these are autonomics, and we're not going to do a full. We're just going to talk briefly about some information with the autonomic, and we'll go ahead and clear this whole thing out actually, because we can really get in depth on all that information. But we are going to just talk about a few, like a little intro. Okay, so we have our autonomic nervous system. Okay, we have the sympathetic nervous system versus the parasympathetic nervous system. And we also reference these as the sympathetic nervous system as what's called the the fight and flight response, while the parasympathetic nervous system, we reference it as the rest and digest. Okay. Now, we need to just sort of get like a few rules. Okay. And we have our sympathetic nervous system, or our fight or flight response. So if you think about like a herd of horses, right? Herd of wild horses out there and a predator. Your fight or flight response is going to be elicited when the herd is aware now of a predator in the area. So originally, maybe let's just say they were all sort of relaxed, okay, and just eating. Okay, so they were eating and just sort of laying around and being lazy, right? No predators. They're in sort of like this basal level of existence. Okay, and I would say that you pretty much have at any given time, you have in this sort of basal level. Okay, you pretty much have like a balance of your sympathetic drive versus your parasympathetic drive. Okay, it's in balance. So at any given time, you have both activated. All right. It's just whenever you see a predator, right? So if you see a predator or something that's going to cause you to initiate the fight or flight response, then your sympathetic nervous system is going to be increased. Okay, you're going to get what's called sympathetic drive. Then if you're, the herd of horses ran from the predator, right? They've escaped, and now they're sort of back to just kind of hanging out, and they're eating grass. And let's say it starts to get dark, and they'll start to get tired. Okay, and I think they're actually corporeal. Also sleep during the day and feed at night as well. But when they're ready to go to sleep, we'll say, when they're ready to go to sleep, then their parasympathetic nervous system is going to go up, and their sympathetic nervous system is going to go down. So these will be out of balance when they're like sleeping, okay, or when they're running. And a few of these sort of definitions and general rules that we can get out of the way is that your sympathetic nervous system, or the drive that is elicited, it's through what we call adrenergic, your adrenergic system. Okay. So these are like neurotransmitters such as your epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay, so adrenaline and noradrenaline. You have a multitude of receptors in your body, okay? But we will say that your Yeah, so first let's talk about a couple. So um, we have alpha and we have beta receptors. Okay. And we have alpha 1 and alpha 2. We have beta 1 and beta 2. Okay, so four different receptors. And we can say the general rule, okay, that in our sympathetic drive, um, we are stimulating the alpha 1 receptors, that most all of the tissues in the sympathetic nervous system, autonomic nervous system, are being stimulated with the alpha 1 receptors. Okay. And there are a few exceptions, though. Okay. We do have a few exceptions, and those are going to be with the beta 1 receptors. Okay. And of the beta 1 receptors, these few exceptions are going to be so we'll say your cardiac tissue. Okay. We'll talk about cardiology, and you have beta 1 receptors in your heart. You have these nodes that are in your atrium. Okay, so you have 4 chambers of the heart. You have an SA node and an AV node. So these are these nodes here, which are responsible for for like the rate of your heart. Okay. Also sort of the rhythm of your heart. So rate would be like chronotropy is what we call it. Rhythm, which is what we call dromotropy. Then we have these like contraction, okay, contraction, and that's called inotropy. Okay, so we have these beta 1 receptors in the heart that are within the SA and AV node. So they're going to be affecting the rate and the rhythm of the firing of your electrical conduction of your heart. So that is going to be affecting heart rate. So it's going to be making an increase, right, or decrease. And we also have the inotropy, or the contraction. So you have cells within your heart, within a tissue. These things are they have these fibers that are within the myocytes, or sorry, the myocardium of your heart. You have these things called Purkinje fibers, and Purkinje, and these things are going to be responsible for the contraction, right? So you can either contract harder or contract less, right? And if you increase your heart rate, or if you increase like the contraction, you have like, this affects your blood pressure, right? So decrease your blood pressure. It's involved with the Purkinje fibers, okay, within your heart. So your heart has these beta 1 receptors, okay, and then we also have a couple other tissues that so we'll say you have your kidneys here. Okay. Your kidneys are also have beta 1 receptors, and these are found within what's called the juxtaglomerular apparatus. And ultimately, what they're going to do, we'll discuss all this more about the JGA and when we talk about renal. But ultimately, what it does is it releases something in your body called renin, and renin is part of your renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, the RAS system. And ultimately, this is going to be responsible for either an increase or a decrease in your blood pressure. Okay. Then we have adipose tissue, so fat cells, right? And adipose tissue, we have beta 1 cells that are going to be stimulated in a sympathetic drive, and if you think about it, you're running from the predator. Well, adipose tissue is a high fat, right? High fat storage, which is equal to glucose. So we can break down fat and have access to glucose, right? So that we can have energy to run from the predator, right? And this is going to be basically an increase of lipolysis. Okay, so the breakdown of that. And then pretty much all other tissues, okay, these are have alpha ones, so these are going to be things like our pupillary dilaryng muscle, okay, so this is going to be dilating our pupil, so that opens up our pupil more, allows us to bring more light in to see the predator, right? So that's called mydriasis, right? Mydriasis. And again, how we just discussed an increase of heart rate and blood pressure due to our beta ones. But we'll just go ahead and stick it in here as well. All right, this is a sort of a master list. We have bronchodilation. So we're talking about the bronchiole of our lungs. So they're going to dilate so we can bring more oxygen in, right? Because we're actively running from the predator, right? We have our intestinal constriction. So we don't need to be putting energy towards digestion, right? So we're going to decrease our digestion. And so that'll be like intestinal constriction, right? We also have peristalsis, right? So that would be in there. So we constrict our GI, so our intestines. We decrease the peristaltic waves of moving food through our contracting our smooth muscle, right? Then we're also going to so we're going to have urinary retention, okay, urinary retention, and that's basically because we have this bladder and then our ureters or bladder here. This has a muscle in it called the detrusor muscle, and then we have a sphincter muscle, okay, and the sphincter muscle is going to be controlled with your alpha 1. So when you stimulate the sphincter muscle, is going to contract the sphincter muscle is going to close it and retain the urine in there. Okay, so in sympathetic drive, we don't need to urinate; we need to run, right? Then we also have there's some other things about sympathetic nervous system, right? So we're gonna be inhibiting our penile erections, inhibiting the erection. We don't need to be thinking about procreating when we're running from a predator, right? So we have all these things here that are pretty much through your sympathetic drive and through your alpha 1 and beta 1 receptors. And then we can then further say for our parasympathetic nervous system, we can say then that there's a few general rules, and that these are going to be so your sympathetic nervous system is going to be alpha 1 and I'm sorry, beta 1. Our parasympathetic nervous system is going to be alpha 2 and beta 2. Okay. And we can say that there's a general rule as well with our parasympathetic, and that we can say that in parasympathetic drive, so all your stimulated tissues are going to be stimulated by your beta 2, okay? And if you just sort of go back through some of the ones we discussed before, right? So if we had mydriasis, So our pupillary muscle, right, was going to be contracted. So now it's going to be relaxed. And so we won't be dilating, we'll be constricting our pupil. So we will have meiosis. Okay, so a constriction of the pupils. So we'll have a decrease of heart rate. We'll have a decrease of blood pressure. Okay, because we're now in rest and digest, the predator's gone, so our heart rate, our blood pressure is down. We're maybe going to be going to sleep or some getting sleepy. We're closing our pupils, right, to let less light in. We're going to so as far as our lungs, right? So we got our lungs here. So our bronchioles are going to be constricted here, right? So we're going to need to be bringing in less oxygen in, right? So we're going to have bronchoconstriction. You don't need as much oxygen when we're not actively exercising, right? We can then also say that we have like an increase in digestion, so our salivation, okay, an increase of lacrimation, which is our tears, micturition. Okay, so this is basically referring to passing urine, right? So before in our sympathetic nervous system, we don't need to urinate, we need to run. So we constrict the sphincter, right? And we are retaining urine. But now we're in rest digest, we can go ahead and relieve the urine out of the bladder. And to do that, our sphincter muscle is going to be relaxed because we're in parasympathetic drive. And in parasympathetic drive, this detrusor muscle up here is contracting. So that's going to contract and it's going to push all the urine down the ureters and out into the environment. And to urinate is micturition. Okay. We're also going to, so with the increase in salivation, we have an increase of our peristalsis. Right, so salivation has enzymes that help start to break down food. So as it's entering into the GI system, an increase in peristalsis is going to help to move the food and contents through the GI system, and it also parasympathetic drive also helps to defecation, so to pass through. Okay. Then the other thing I also want to mention here, this is just sort of like a very simplified. We'll do more in-depth discussions about the autonomic nervous system and sympathetic and parasympathetic drive. But I would say then that if you have vasculature, right? So when we're referencing like parasympathetic drive, okay, but if you're in your skeletal muscle, okay, you have blood vessels, all right, you have blood vessels. These blood vessels are going to be constricting in parasympathetic drive, okay, so they're going to be constricted, all right, so smaller hole, right? And that's because you're relaxing, you're sleeping, you don't need to be bringing in blood into the tissues, you're not actively exercising. But then when you are running from the predator, right, you're going to dilate those blood vessels, okay, and these are due to your alpha 1s, okay, so you're going to dilate your blood vessels, right, because you need to bring in more like oxygen and nutrients into the skeletal muscle. So you'll get you'll get dilation of your skeletal muscle. Okay. That's just sort of a quick version of all this. It gets much more in depth. And I would say that everything we discussed here, you can pretty much see as a recap here with this chart. Okay. And you can just sort of pause the video here, write your notes, or I'm working on putting together a website, medrobot.io, and make all these lectures, whiteboard sessions, and charts, and then notes as well. So you would have notes to be able to go along with each of these sessions here. And that's going to conclude section 1.0, divisions of the nervous system. Thank you.